Hi there, this is Matt at State of Flux here with a review for Star Trek: The Next Generation, the complete series. But before I talk to you about that, I'd like to talk to you about this journal I published. This is the 31-day horror movie challenge. And what it is, it's 31 specific movie challenges, such as a werewolf movie. What it is you get to choose the werewolf movie. There'll be 3 questions across the board for every challenge that are the same. Who made it, what works, what doesn't. But then there are going to be 3 questions specifically curated to the challenge at hand, such as what other type of movie uses the duality of character that you find in a werewolf movie? This is something that if you like film criticism, if you like to engage with the media that you consume and watch, this is something that you probably enjoy. You can pick it up through Amazon or in the link through the description box down below to get yourself a copy. But Star Trek: The Next Generation. This was one that I was excited to come back to because when I first watched it back in the day, I came to Star Trek, both the original series and The Next Generation, from the movies first, and kind of worked my way back. And since, as many people are kind of aware, the Next Generation movies aren't nearly as strong as the original series movies, I was a little lackluster in my enthusiasm for watching the Next Generation series. But watch it I did, and there's a lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot of meh, as you'll get with any kind of episodic television of that era. However, revisiting it now, especially in the context of having seen more recent Star Trek, it's one that kind of has grown on me quite a bit. Back in the day, I would say that the first 3 seasons were my 3 favorite seasons, and I still hold on to that to some extent. It feels the most like original series Star Trek, and original series is where my fandom originates and really still kind of remains. That said, I did find my appreciation of the back half of the series grow considerably in my recent rewatch, and I think a lot of that honestly has to do with watching the TV show Picard, with its many qualities and pitfalls therein. But I was able to discover stuff that didn't work for me before started to work for me. Characters that I'd completely written off. The character that I always lamented about watching in the original series was Wesley Crusher. I just could not stand that character. And maybe it's because I have kids of my own now, and watching them grow and try to establish their own life and their own path, that I can find something to relate to in that Wesley Crusher character. His episodes really kind of dominated my rewatch of this. Whenever it was a Wesley episode, I used to just be like, oh, Christ. But now I've found that I kind of enjoy him and his character. Another one that really grew in my rewatch this time is Beverly Crusher, who my memory of her character wasn't nearly as strong as her character upon the rewatch. And whenever she had an episode, so the ones that are specifically curated to her aren't always the greatest. However, when she has an active presence within storylines of importance, she's always really good in them. And I think of the actors, she's the one that has grown the most. She seemed oddly green in the first season and didn't really know how to emotionally connect with the character or the audience through the character. But by season 7, I think she's one of the stronger performers on the show. And the thing that this show has is great characters, but more than that, great actors in those characters to elevate the character that is there. I think some criticisms hurled at the original series is you love the characters, but the acting is very dated and kind of hammy, especially with Shatner. I disagree with that. You can listen to my points about that. I think this show navigated away from those criticisms by picking incredibly strong actors, having kind of a base level character idea of who these characters might be, and then using the actor to bring the character to life rather than the Creature of the Week dramatic storyline. And so you had the actors inform character much more than you had in the original series, with the exception of Spock. And that works in this series' favor. People remember and like these characters a lot more, truly because they like the actors. And I think that's kind of the key difference. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of go through the whole series and sort of give my thoughts on each of the individual seasons, some of my favorite episodes, or notable episodes therein. I will say that the one character that never really impressed me in my original watch, and also still is probably my least favorite on this rewatch, was Data. I'm just not a Data fan. I get the appeal a little bit, but he just feels like inverted Spock a little bit, and it doesn't work for me because I think Spock was executed so brilliantly that seeing sort of another stab at him, but instead of having a robot trying to discover emotion instead of an emotionless being try to thwart emotion, it just felt redundant to me, and my rewatch this time didn't really change that. But I will mention some of the important Data episodes as we go through this. Season 1 is often criticized as being the worst season. I disagree. I like Season 1. It's not amazing, but I do think it is the closest in line with the original series. And so because of that and my love of the original series, I really like a lot of the individual episodes, and the way they wrote them was kind of the way they wrote the original series, which was pull in a brilliant writer, have them do a one-off story, the characters will plop them into that story, and we'll see where it goes from there, and it's very Creature of the Week, much more so than the rest of the series would be, even though that is kind of the standard for the series as a whole. But Season 1 is kind of a unique beast when it comes to that, even bringing in some of the original writers of the original series and the animated series to pen episodes for Season 1. But I like it. I think one of the reasons that people don't so much is the characters were still finding their footing, and it definitely shows. How Riker acts in Season 1 is not going to be necessarily how he acts in Season 2 or 4 or 6. So that, I think, and that's where some off-putting nature can be. The only one that is truly consistent between all the seasons is Data. But I digress. So Season 1, the first episode, Encounter at Farpoint, is kind of an interesting episode. It's weirdly enough, I don't know if I had seen that originally, if I would have continued on with the show. It's kind of flat. I know a lot of it is spent trying to introduce us to this many plethora of characters that are a lot more unique, different, and vibrant than we had with the original series. The original series was populated by essentially humans and Spock. This one, you get humans, but maybe some humans with disabilities. You get kids, you get much more women in vital roles. You have an empath, you have an alien, you have a robot. So going off of that, it's much more, there's so much more to grab, which means that there's so much more character to be written in that first episode that once you're familiar with the characters, it feels boring, and if you're unfamiliar with the characters, you feel not lost, but disconnected a little bit. That gets better as the episode goes on and you start familiarizing with everything, but then having the character of Q be the main villain of that first episode, he's so different than everybody else in it that upon my first watching of it, I hated that character. It reminded me too much of the character, the villain from The Squire of Gothos, which has been kind of retconned by fans as being an original Q. But even though that character feels the most original series-y, he just felt so off-putting compared to everything else that we were thrust upon in this episode. So Q didn't work for me. That will change. But Encounter at Farpoint is a fine episode. It gives us the unique separation of the saucer part of the ship, which had never been done. It was a great visual. It has a strong conclusion, and it introduces you to all these characters. But the first episode that I really truly like of the Next Generation Season 1 is The Naked Now, which is one that most people hate, and that's too bad. It is a direct sequel, and the only direct sequel to an original series episode, where this crew encounters the same virus that Kirk's crew did. It affects them in different ways and whatnot, and but I liked it. Just like I love that episode at seeing brand new characters do something completely silly and bonkers, and seeing that happen again with the Next Generation crew. It created the similitude that I needed, of connecting these two universes, these two starships separated 100 years. The symmetry is there, and as I say, it created this reality that I needed to make these new characters feel a part of that old world, which felt organic to me. Hide and Q is a good Riker episode. You see what Riker would do. Sorry, I bumped into my child's toy. What Riker would do if given the Q power, and it feels similar to the episode Where No Man Has Gone Before, nowhere near as good as that episode, but it made Q a more vibrant villain, a more grounded villain for me in this episode, and it got to see what Riker would do when pushed. And Riker being my favorite series character, I'll amend that shortly, but Riker being my favorite consistent character, this was a good offing for him early on. We have the episode Data Lore. It's important to the character of Data and Lore, so I mention it. Heart of Glory expands what we know about the Klingons. It gives us first really good look as to who Worf is. And I really enjoy that, and it connects shockingly well to the Undiscovered Country, even though this came out about 4, maybe 5 years before Undiscovered Country would come out. It's impressive at how well they kind of connect. I appreciated that. Skin of Evil, which is another love it or hate it episode, is actually my favorite episode of Season 1. I think it presents a genuinely scary villain. Star Trek doesn't do scary often, but this one is a strong, scary episode. It has emotional heft and weight when one of the main characters dies, a character that I really quite like. I will not mention who it is if you've not seen it, but I really like that character. And it dove deep into Deanna Troi, who is another character that I kind of like, that kind of was important very early on in Season 1 and then just kind of disappeared for long periods of times and then came back for this episode. Then you had the episode Conspiracy. I believe this is the first episode, maybe it was the next one, that mentions the Borg, but it involved a conspiracy within the Federation and creepy alien monsters and that kind of stuff. It's a fun one-off episode. It feels super disjointed from the entire rest of the season and series, but I do like the episode, and it presented a cool little alien mystery kind of thing that was neat. Season 2 is probably the worst season of the show. However, when it works spectacularly. I would not be remiss if I did not mention that the first episode and last episode of Season 2 are two of the worst episodes of the show. You have The Child, which is a Deanna episode. Oh my god, that is some bad Star Trek right there. And then you have the final episode of the season. I can't even remember what it's called. It just paints us a scenario of what if Riker died? Oh God, kind of thing, and it's terrible. It's just a straight up awful episode because most of it is flashbacks to the early season because writer's strike. Boy, sure would suck if we went through something like that now again, eh? Season 2 had some of my favorite episodes. One that people don't talk about enough, but I really love, is Where Silence Has a Lease. That is one of the best episodes of The Next Generation. I truly love it. It reminds me of this series version of the Corbomite maneuver, which was one of my favorite episodes of the original series. This is taking that same core concept and presenting it to Captain Picard and see how he differs from Captain Kirk. The two characters, watching those two episodes side by side is a fascinating experience, because Kirk takes it on with swagger, with gumption, and trying to better that other person. Picard handles the same general situation with first diplomacy, but then moral confidence that he's right, that what is going to happen must happen to prove a point to the alien. And it's interesting on how these two characters are both great captains, but completely differ in their approach. Excellent episode. The Measure of a Man is the best episode Data is the main character of. It is not only a great Data episode, it's a great Riker episode. It is one that explores the nature of what it is to be human. That one, if you also like court case kind of dramas, this is the episode for you. I love that stuff. It's great. The Dauphine is a really cute episode. It's a Wesley episode where he meets this girl that he really is kind of vibing with, and I'll let you check it out from there. But it's one that always sticks in my mind. I really quite like it. It's an unassuming episode, but a good one. Q Who is one of the best episodes of the series. This is where we meet the Borg for the first time. And it is the best use of Borg, in my opinion, of the Next Generation TV show. It is strong, they're scary monsters, and I like how Q gives us the warning of them before their presence yet to come. It's a great episode. Season 3 is certainly an improvement over seasons 1 and 2. It has less episodes that really blew me away, but consistently good writing across the season. My favorite episode of season 3 is Yesterday's Enterprise, which is one of the best episodes of the show. Back when Quentin Tarantino was talking about making his own Star Trek movie, it was rumored to be based on this storyline, but with original series characters rather than the Next Generation. But he was going to utilize this as the framework, and I think it would have been a great movie because it is a great episode. It takes a great look at the character of Guinan, who is my favorite character in all of the Next Generation and beyond. She is great. Whoopi Goldberg, hot damn, you're amazing. But this allows her to examine what would happen when she gets thrust into this alternate timeline where times have changed, and the true weight of everything is powerful. This is a morally complex episode, one of the most morally complex episodes of the entire series. Some of the best Star Trek, just full stop, period, there is. Yesterday's Enterprise is a must-see. Moving on to Sarek. Sarek is a great continuation of the original series by bringing back Spock's father, who we've gotten to know in a handful of episodes from the original series and movies. This continues him on in a way that is somewhat similar to how we were first introduced to him in, I believe, Journey to Babel. And Sarek is a good character. I liked how he interacted with everybody in this series through this episode. And then there is the best of both worlds. The two-part that, if I'm being honest, is kind of overrated. I'm not going to lie about that. But it is what the thing cliffhangers are made of. And I think next to Who Shot JR and Who Shot Mr. Burns is one of the greatest cliffhanger endings of any TV series ever. But it is good. It gives us another glimpse of the Borg and what they have to offer, which slides directly into Season 4. Season 4 has the best episode very early on. It's the second episode of the season, and it's the episode titled Family, and we get to explore different families of different characters. We get to explore Picard vacationing in his home in France with his brother and see the disconnect there. You get to see Wesley trying to kind of come into his own and finally confront the idea of his father, the true presence of his father, and we get to see Worf confront his family, and how each of these things is both emotional in different ways, while also having little beats of humor throughout. It's some of the strongest writing in Next Generation. You have the episode Remember Me, where Beverly Crusher, can't, and that is a pretty fun, slightly spooky episode that I really enjoyed. You have Final Mission, which is the big swan song of Wesley Crusher. It's his goodbye episode and his best offering of the entire series. It is a strong episode as well. Night Terrors, again, Star Trek does spooky from time to time. Usually it doesn't work too well. This is one of the cases where it does. Moving on to Season 5, which I think is the best season of the show. Early on, we get introduced to the new character of Laren, and that's in the episode Ensign Ro. I really like her character. She's in only like 10-15 episodes of the entire show, and that includes even into Picard. And every time she's on, I know I'm in for a good episode, because she is compelling to watch. I love her character. Disaster is my favorite episode of Season 5. It reminds me of my favorite episode of the TV show Firefly, Out of Gas, where suddenly the Enterprise breaks down. What do the characters do to navigate their potential death? And that one is great. Again, great use of Ensign Ro in that episode as well. The next episode I'm going to mention could be awful, and it sounds bad. It's called The Game, and it's what if video game but bad kind of episode. But what it is a strong episode for Wesley Crusher, who's vacationing back on the ship, and kind of engaging with a new young ensign, played by Ashley Judd, in a great performance, and it's too bad her character really doesn't linger on beyond this. She was in a handful of episodes prior to it, but their characters, their chemistry is just fantastic. I would have liked to have seen more of them. As is, I have this episode and I like it. Unification is the episode that says goodbye to Sarek and brings back Spock. It's a good episode, if a little long-winded and boring, but I enjoyed seeing what Spock is up to during The Next Generation. Cause and Effect is a good one that swings us back into another dilemma not too dissimilar from yesterday's Enterprise, but you keep seeing what happens when they're put into a Groundhog Day-like situation and how the characters begin to remember. It's good. Borg is the second best use of Borg throughout the entire series. It is paints us with a moral conundrum of what happens when you start viewing these soulless monsters such as the Borg as being actual beings that are alive. And it asks some interesting questions. The next phase is a good one, worth your time. Inner Light. The next phase is a good Geordi episode, again with Ensign Ro. Inner Light is one that I only included on this because it's so popular. It's important to how fiction is written. This was the only episode that was written by fan submission. And, pardon me, it is a strong episode. I think overrated, to be quite honest. But I recognize its importance and the skill of dramatic storytelling that actually carries into some of the episodes in later seasons. Season 6... you start to see the series faltering a little bit in Season 6. It has early on the episode Relics, which a lot of people hate. I get why you'd hate it, but I just love the character of Scotty so much. Seeing him back one more time, even if he's confronted with his own irrelevancy, which is something that, anybody who's aging out of relevancy is to experience, this show confronts it head on. It's not easy to watch, but there's good stuff to be had, and James Doohan is fantastic in the episode, which is his penultimate performance as this character. The episode Rascals, where a handful of the characters get young down, is a fun one. I had a lot of fun with that, and it has a great Data moment near the end. A Fistful of Datas is evocative of the episode Spectre of the Gun from the original series. I like it. I'm a Western guy, so this one was up my alley. Worf in a Western world was pretty cool. Chain of Command is one that, again, has great performances and is much loved. I think it's a little overrated, personally, but it has some great stuff. And if you ask Alexa how many lights there are... Alexa! How many lights are there?
There are 4 lights.
I don't know if you heard that, but Alexa just responded, there are 4 lights. It's certainly hit its cultural cornerstone of importance, so I had to recommend it based on that. Tapestry is season 6 best episode, and that's what happens when when Jean-Luc Picard confronts his own death head on, and how Q really is beginning to grow as a character. We're going to touch on that shortly. Lessons is a good episode to kind of round out season 6, moving into season 7, which has the lowest lows consistently of any of the seasons, but has good episodes along the way. So season 7 is just kind of perplexing. I really like the episode Attached, where something that they've hinted at repeatedly is that Picard and Crusher really like each other and dig each other, and they're involved and invested with each other, but are keeping each other separate. A lot of people complain that this episode goes nowhere, but that's not true. If you've watched Picard season 3, it's just something that it was finally important to acknowledge, and I think season 3 is elevated by this episode, and this episode in turn is elevated by season 3 of Picard. So check out Attached. Parallels is neat, where you're seeing parallel timelines, and they bring back Wesley Crusher in a kind of unique and interesting way, but I like that episode. The Pegasus is one that's not only a really good Riker episode, a really good episode of season 7 that connects in such an unusual way to the final episode of the original series, of Star Trek Enterprise. So I'll touch on that and save more of my comments of this episode for that one, but this is a great Riker episode where he's really confronted with genuine conflict. Sub Rosa is a fascinating one, because this is possibly Star Trek at some of its absolute worst. It's not as bad as The Child or the last episode of Season 2, but it's up there, where Beverly Crusher falls in love with this ghost that's been haunting her family for 800 years, and been actively romantically sleeping with all of the women in that family, including her grandmother. And that's why she meets this ghost, is at her grandmother's funeral. What is going on? You watch that and you lose faith in the writers of Star Trek. But the very next episode is Lower Decks, which is the best episode of this season next to one other one. And it's some of the best episode of this series. And in all honesty, Lower Decks looks at life for the characters that aren't the main characters. It takes 4 random cadets, all of whom you've seen at least once before, largely. Largely you've seen them at least once before. And you get to view how the characters behave, the main characters that you've grown to love, behave around people who are kind of less than them. And how these people view the characters that we like, and how that in turn changes and shifts how we view the characters that we like. And it's a fun episode, it's a smart episode, and then it takes a turn, and it's one of the most dramatic and emotionally relevant storylines I have ever seen presented in Next Generation. It is powerful storytelling and really repaints what you've just watched and the importance of what you're watching. And it is strong storytelling, to say the least. The episode, the penultimate episode of the series, Preemptive Strike, is our finale to Ensign Rowe, and we see the journey she has taken, and it's a compelling one. And then this one leaves off on a really interesting note that gets finished off on the TV show Picard. I think this episode has always been a great one, but it's elevated since my watching of Picard. And then we have All Good Things, which is my favorite episode of The Next Generation. And it is a powerful feature-length finale to the show that takes us right back to the first episode of it, and then shoots us off 25 years into the future, around the time Picard takes place. So it weirdly connects to where it started and where it's ultimately going to end, which was fortuitous. And I will say the makeup on the actors in their later stages, 25 years later, is pretty on point to actually how they look. It's not necessarily overdone for most of the characters, and it looks believable. But this one is a strong episode that you get to see that the whole series has been a character journey, but not for the one you'd expect. Yes, Patrick Stewart gives it his all, and Picard, this is his story through and through, and you get to see how his character has grown, including by the very end of this episode, allowing himself to feel that thing that he's been holding himself back from, which is he's always viewed these people as his like co-workers and stuff like that, and he's treated them with friendliness, but he's never actually admitted to himself that these are his friends. So the show kind of closes with that admission that these people are important to him, they are his friends, and it's okay to engage with them as such. But the series finale kind of gives us this unique thing where the whole premise of this show was built upon Q testing Picard, and the test was there. Picard is ever being tested, and Q dips in now and then, several times in season 1, but at least once a season thereafter, just to kind of remind Picard that he's part of this test. And the ultimate thing that he learns is that this was Q's character arc. He's the one, the whole show, where he's the one that learns, not Picard. Picard didn't need to learn any of that. Q needed to learn from Picard. And it's a beautiful kind of ending where it's never overtly stated that way, but this was Q's character journey, and I kind of love that. And John Delancey is fabulous. Both this episode and Tapestry really tap into who that character is and how important he is in those episodes, and how much he's grown in them. But yeah, I like this series. It's very good. It was better upon rewatch. I liked it even better now that I've seen the entirety of Picard and where that series ultimately goes. Yeah, and I was watching this once a day, or at least an episode once a day every morning, and my daughter got invested in it. And she liked the original series and stuff, but she found herself really invested in this, liking the character of Riker and Crusher, Beverly Crusher, and she really liked Troi. But Picard, she really grew to like as well. So Yeah, it was fun watching this. What are some of your favorite episodes? I will give you a top 10 list next week of my top 10 favorite episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I look forward to that. Let me know what you think of this series. What are your favorite episodes? Gene Roddenberry really had a guiding hand in those first 3 seasons. Thusly, those first 3 seasons really do feel more similar to the original series, so I do gravitate towards those, but I recognize Season 5 is probably the best episode of the series, and Season 4 really allows itself to explore these characters free of Roddenberry's guiding hand. Roddenberry is his own beast that could be discussed someday, but I like it. Who are your favorite characters? For me, anytime Guinan's in there, I am in, man. She's my fave, and anytime it's a Riker episode, I'm looking for it. It's a good time. Thanks for watching, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Peace.